Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Today the herb we're going to talk about is Potentilla. Potentilla is a herb with a great history. It's a astringent herb. It has many good uses. But before we get into that, I'll go ahead and get this week's recipe out of the way. Remember, all my recipes, all the food information comes from my book, The Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking. Most of the herbs I've been talking about recently come from my book, The Encyclopedia of Medicinal Bitter Herbs, by the way. So, those two books, my show's kind of a synopsis of those topics, and then, of course, I go off rambling in various directions. So, before we get into Potentilla, let's talk about some food. Last night I had a conversation with a friend, and, she is a master baker. She manages a very high-end bakery in California. She's a trained chef. She's an herbalist. And so you can imagine we have a lot to talk about, and our conversations usually go off in many directions and last for hours, because she's also an avid outdoors woman, I guess you would say. She loves to hike and camp. When I first met her, she was living in a tent. I mean, she's hardcore, okay, when it comes to her love of the outdoors, much like I am, So we started talking about deep-fried foods. Now, she loves deep-fried foods as much as I love deep-fried foods. Deep-fried foods get such a bad reputation, and it's really because of poor technique. And I'm sure, like people listening to this podcast right now, this is a podcast about herbal medicine. He's talking about deep frying. I mean, does it seem to go together, right? It's like in our modern conception of cooking, we think of deep frying as being so incredibly unhealthy. Actually, it can be one of the healthiest ways of cooking. The main thing with deep frying, and I'm just going to touch on it a little bit, I'll get more into it in a minute. When you put the food into the oil, if the oil is at the right temperature, and it has not been used several times, the water inside the food immediately starts turning to steam and starts pushing its way out. That's why when you drop something in a deep fryer, it bubbles, right? It just bubbles like crazy. It's like you dropped an Alka-Seltzer into water, right? That, when done properly, not fried too long, not fried at too low a temperature, of course not fried at too hot a temperature, not fried with old oil, actually pushes the oil out and away from the food. So properly fried food, using the best fat you can use, is actually healthier for you than most other forms of cooking. It actually, if you are concerned about food absorbing grease, meaning fat, if you're concerned about cholesterol. I am not. Did you know cholesterol has never been scientifically proven to be unhealthy? Seriously. I mean, for the past, 50 years, doctors have been, you got to get your cholesterol down. You got to get your cholesterol down. Unless, of course, you can have a genetic disorder where your body has a niacin deficiency and it doesn't absorb cholesterol and you have too much cholesterol in your blood. It causes little tears in your arteries and causes the cholesterol to actually clot. That's what killed Marty Robbins. It's not a common condition. It's genetic. Marty Robbins, one of the greatest singers of all time. And the man was incredible, great songwriter, great guitarist, real showman. This is another aside, but he grew up in circuses and an Old West show with his grandfather. If you want to see a true natural born performer, pull up some old videos of Marty Robbins, especially if you like cowboy songs. He did some great songs. I mean, from like kind of pop rock stuff in the 50s, like a white sports coat and a pink carnation, to the incredible El Paso, out in the West Texas town of El Paso, which I first heard, of course, via the Grateful Dead, and that was one of the main things that got me into country music was actually the Grateful Dead. Thanks to the Dead, I suddenly had all kinds of things in common with my grandparents and could enjoy, George Jones and Hank Williams and Johnny Cash and certainly Marty Robbins. I think a lot of people have kind of gone through that journey of, of, 60s rock and roll, 70s rock and roll to bluegrass and old country. And when you really come full circle, you can really appreciate American music a lot better. Anyway, the cholesterol is essential. As I was talking about last week when we started talking about soy and different things, your brain is mostly cholesterol. If you start lowering your cholesterol, people start having personality changes, frozen shoulder syndrome, Alzheimer's-like symptoms, depression and anxiety. I think one of the main reasons we have so much depression and anxiety in our society these days is because of diet, is because we're getting too many chemical and phytoestrogens in our food. Testosterone levels are dropping, sperm counts are dropping, and suddenly everybody's on meds, right? Well, a lot of times, and I've witnessed this, now again, I'm not giving medical advice. When I was in my teens, a teacher convinced me to become a vegetarian, and I suddenly started suffering from basically depression and weakness, listlessness, what was it Jimmy Carter always used to say, a malaise, right? Put on your sweater and suffer through the Carter malaise. I guess now we have to put on our sweater and suffer through the Biden train wreck. If there's one good thing about it, hey, I got to relive the 70s. I missed out on it. I wasn't born then. So the only thing missing is actually good music, The 70s, you still had really good country music like George Jones and Johnny Paycheck, but you also had the Ramones, my favorite rock band of all time, et cetera, et cetera. And the Bee Gees. Hey, I love the Bee Gees. Anyway, I'm wandering off here. Fat is not bad for you. What is bad for you is certain I have such trouble with this word, hydrogenated fats, fats that are made to be shelf stable. If you cook in natural fats like butter, lard, beef tallow or suet, olive oil, walnut oil, these are going to be a whole lot healthier for you. The problem is, they don't have as long as shelf life. They start to go rancid, and they have usually a lower smoke point. Now, actually, beef tallow is probably my favorite fat for frying, for deep frying, especially like French fries. Of course, lard is fantastic. Again, you're going to want real lard. And see, that's the problem. The lard you buy in the store has been made shelf stable through essentially binding hydrogen molecules with the fat. And that's the stuff, that's margarine essentially made from pork fat as opposed to vegetable oil. That's the stuff that can really lead to heart disease and such. Natural fats are actually incredibly good for you, and deep frying is one of the tastiest ways we could use it. Now, I'm not talking funnel cake and all, deep fried Twinkies and such you might get at a county fair. North Carolina is really famous for our seafood. And in recent years, I have heard nothing but complaints, and I'll tell you why. First of all, North Carolina's signature seafood originated in Calabash, North Carolina. That is the last little fishing community. Now it's golf courses and retirement homes, of course, but that was the last little fishing community before you hit the South Carolina line and get into Little River and the madness and tackiness and crime off the charts of Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach is now one of the most dangerous places in America, by the way. Calabash was this little fishing community, and it was the poorest county in the entire state. And now, again, it's nothing but retired Yankees and all that. Calabash was a major center for shrimping, especially. The shrimp boats would go out, they'd come in, you know, abundant flounder. It's actually fluke, summer fluke is what we have in the area. It's the best fish to fry. Um, all kinds of clams, and actually, for some reason, most of the clams that are harvested in North Carolina are sent up north to make clam chowder. Most North Carolinians only get clams as clam strips, which are sliced up and deep fried clams, which are delicious if done right, and if done wrong, are so chewy they're like chewing on old bubble gum or a piece of rubber. There are much better ways to cook clams, and I get on into all that in my book. Scallops, bay scallops, sea scallops. I mean, plenty, and crab, blue crab. Oh, we have so many blue crab. And I mean, that's like one of my blue crabs and oysters, which is the other thing you always get on a seafood platter, deep fried, of course, is those are my favorite things. Okay, blue crab and oyster, good piece of fish, spray it down with some lemon, homemade cocktail sauce, and I'll give you my recipe on that in a minute, and some fries and hush puppies, and I mean, I will be in like paradise, right? But in recent years, the quality in most restaurants has really gone downhill. Now, I'm not going to name any names. Calabash style seafood is sold throughout eastern North Carolina, and occasionally you'll even find it west of Raleigh. Whereas all those family-owned restaurants in Calabash, which was actually made famous by Jimmy Durante. Jimmy Durante was one of the most popular singers and actors, really, from the 1920s to the 1940s. And his band wandered through town one night. Everything was closed, and he went to a certain Calabash restaurant. I happen to know the family, so I'm not going to say the name. They no longer own the restaurant, so it's not like I'd be giving them favoritism, but there's still a lot of competition down there in Calabash about who actually owns the rights to this story. But I think they have had the best claim. The lady that owned the restaurant opened up, fed the band. I mean, they were in the middle of nowhere. They were in the coastal swamps in North Carolina in 1930s, middle of the night. You would go probably 50 miles and not even see an open gas station, much less something to eat. And so for the rest of his show, the rest of his life, he would always sign off. He'd say, "Good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are." He was great. Jimmy Durante is one of the funniest men ever lived. Very, very good Christian too. He was Catholic, and he did so much work for St. Jude's, raising money for them. Really, really good man. Remember the Knights of Columbus and all that. And he always had this reputation as being this, old scoundrel that all the girls loved when he was in his 80s, and he had this giant nose. He always said they loved the schnozola. I love his stuff. If you want to see something funny this weekend and hear some good music and just laugh, just look up Jimmy Durante on YouTube. I mean, that's clean, wholesome. Yeah, he could be a little naughty sometimes, but that's the good kind of humor, like, Bob Hope and all those guys that we, took for granted, and now there's just garbage on television. Well, anyway, I guess in the 90s, early 2000s, especially the 2000s, instead of sourcing their seafood from local fishermen, most restaurants now get it from food service companies like Cisco, U.S. Foods. I'm not naming names to be specific for one country. I'm saying one company. I'm saying companies that bring in frozen food. So the same seafood you get at a restaurant sitting right on the waterfront in North Carolina is the same frozen crap from Asia that they're serving at Olive Garden. Unfortunately. Or Red Lobster. I've eaten at Red Lobster 3 times in my life. I got food poisoning every single time. So the quality of the seafood went down. What also happened was, well, prices went up as these stopped being, really impoverished fishing villages and became resort areas and retirement areas. So people were going in paying more for lower quality seafood. Well, they also started cutting corners with the oil. They started reusing the oil. See, every time you bring oil to the right temperature for frying, you're getting close to its smoke point, and its smoke point lowers each time it's reheated. So whereas you might be able to fry something at almost 400 degrees, right, the first go around, the next time you're only going to go to about 375, and the time after that 350. Really 400 is probably a lot hotter than you really go. I mean, I just threw that out. So we're really talking more than 300s. The deal is, as that smoke point lowers, less steam is being pushed out of the fish or whatever you happen to be frying, fried chicken, whatever you throw in there. My friend last night was talking about these wonderful fried leeks she puts with a porterhouse steak with butter and blue cheese, and I was almost ready to propose marriage when she said that. So anyway, when you use that oil over and over, you can only heat it to a certain point, and it lowers each time, and every time your food comes out more and more greasy. It also starts to get that burnt oil taste. So the complaint for the last 20 years or so from almost everyone I've talked to is they say, I hate calabash style seafood. It's nothing but greasy, nasty. It has no flavor. And unfortunately, too often they are right. The restaurants that actually do it the right way are few and far between. So it's important that you learn to deep fry food the right way so you can have wonderful food. And I mean, there are many ways I prepare fish and other seafood, but in fact, when it comes to oysters, I really just like them roasted until they just barely open and they're just barely cooked. They call them wet well, if you go to an oyster roast, they have wet, medium, and dry. I like mine wet. That means they're not really cooked, you know. They're just barely popped open. Put some lemon juice and hot sauce on there. Again, I'm in paradise. You know, half my life was spent in the coastal swamps of North Carolina, and I love fishing. I love seafood. I love it. Anyway, that is why people have complained about our seafood, and I think it's justifiably so, and I think every restaurant that does things the wrong way deserves to lose customers and be shut down. You either do it right or you go home. People deserve to have good food. I wrote my cookbook, The Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking, because it's so hard to get a decent meal in a restaurant these days. I mean, with COVID and the Biden economy, most family-owned restaurants have closed. About all that's left are the big guys that got government bailouts. I'm sorry, you're not going to get a good meal at one of those chain restaurants. And you're not going to get a healthy meal. You're not going to get something that's good for you. You have to learn to cook for yourself, and you'll save a whole lot of money. You know, there was a time in my life when I was seriously in debt, and one of the main ways I saved money, stop eating out, cook for myself. Got healthier, had better food, and really I haven't gone back because I can't buy a decent meal in most towns, even for the highest amount of money. I can cook better at home. I hope I can help you to do the same, so you at least have the option. I like to eat seasonally. I love my garden. Seasonally for me does include a lot of fish and a lot of seafood. I think everybody likes fish and seafood that's fried the right way, okay? Peanut oil is generally the oil they use in restaurants if they care enough to do it the right way. If they use just cheap vegetable oil, they can reuse it a little longer, but the quality is going to really deteriorate. As I said, I am particularly fond of beef tallow, just beef fat. When I get hamburger meat, or, well, I actually buy some beef from a local beef rancher, I always save the fat and render it down the same way your grandmothers used to save the bacon grease, when she fried bacon, and keep it in the refrigerator. And I really like to cook with beef fat. I really like to cook with real pork fat, which is the same thing. It's rendered down pork lard. It's not treated with chemicals. It's normal. It's natural. If you're of German heritage, maybe you love schmaltz, maybe you love chicken fat. Jewish folks love their schmaltz, and they make some great fried food. Probably the healthiest fats for you of all are goose and duck fat. They may actually be the most healthy fats on earth. And if you're a duck hunter, a goose hunter, or you raise them, you're going to have a lot of good fat that you can use, and I totally recommend you do so. Of course, it's really precious stuff, and I would probably pan fry with duck or goose fat before I would deep fry, and I really save it more for confit, which is something we'll get into another time. But yeah, that's really high quality stuff. Butter just has too low a smoke point. You can't really deep fry in butter, unfortunately. If you just used it once, but it's going to brown, If you clarify the butter, and that's another technique we can get into some other time, the butter can be heated to a much higher temperature without it browning and burning. But so oil of your choice. Just, look at your recipe and it's going to tell you what temperature at which to fry. Here's how I do it. I use a cast iron, like a Dutch oven. I don't use a deep fryer. I have one. I have a couple of deep fryers. Sometimes if I'm cooking for a lot of people, I might pull them out. There's a lot of cleanup involved. I use the Dutch oven all the time. Anyway, you want a heavy vessel that is going to maintain its temperature, heat slowly, and cool down slowly. The heavier, the better. Or use an electric deep fryer. I don't, like I said, most people will use a thermometer to tell them the temperature of the oil. That's why I'm being a little vague. I don't do that. I put the oil in there and I look until it just gets little whiffs of vapor coming off the top. And if I'm not quite sure, I'll take a pinch of flour and drop it in there. And if it starts frying right away, I know my oil's ready. I use my nose, I use my ears, and I use my eyes a lot in frying. My preference is to really let the fish and the seafood come through, so I do a very light breading. All I do is just take it. It's damp. Seafood and fish are necessarily damp, and unless you really try to dry them off, which I wouldn't do. And I just dredge it through seasoned flour or cornmeal. Now, some things I prefer cornmeal, like catfish, for instance. Seasoned flour can be just plain all-purpose flour and salt. It can be flour with some Creole seasoning, which is my favorite, But sometimes I don't want anything on there. Or you can do your herb blend of choice. You can do your spice blend of choice. You can do whatever. If you want more batter, you can do dredge it through flour, then put it in, egg wash, and then back in the batter. There are various things. You've got beer batter. You've got various ways of making batter to get more and more crunch and crust on there. That's not my thing. I want the fish. I'm not so big on the breading. So I just want it to fry up nice and crispy and delicious, golden brown and delicious. Dredge it through the flour, put it in the hot oil, walk away. It's that simple. Don't mess with it. It will sink and it will come up and start floating and it's going to be bubbling like an Alka-Seltzer. Don't overcrowd your deep fryer. You want to maintain that oil temperature, and if you put too much in there at once, it's going to cool the oil down. You're going to end up with soggy fish. I know it's done when instead of fizz and bubble, I start hearing a crackling sound. You will eventually learn that as well. Trial and error. It's really easy, and most flounder fillet doesn't take more than a minute or two to fry. You can use the same technique with frying chicken. If you're really not comfortable with any of this and you want to be super specific on your oil temp and you don't have a deep fryer and you don't have a thermometer, you can actually fry it in your oven. Set the exact temperature you want for that oil. Put your vessel inside the oven, close the door. When the oven is preheated, give it about a minute or two, and then put whatever you're frying, whether it's fish or chicken or hush puppies or anything, in there. Be very careful though. If it splashes out, you can have an oven fire. Oven fires are very hard to deal with, so you have to lay things in gently. So I'm going to give this a disclaimer. I'm not recommending that way, but it is really good when you're cooking a lot of fried chicken for people and you don't have a big enough deep fryer and you don't really feel like working 3 or 4 pans on the stove to pan fry it all. Yeah, the oven fry method is really, really good. So that's it as far as my fried fish. Seriously. And fried oysters, fried clams, fried anything. Anything. The shrimp. I'm going to fry some shrimp this afternoon. And again, I'm just going to peel those shrimp. I'm going to dredge them through a little seasoned flour. They're going in the oil for just a little bit until they curl up. And then they're golden brown and delicious. Take them out, salt them while they're hot, and eat them as fresh as possible. A little squirt of lemon juice, and usually, that's about all I really want. My cocktail sauce recipe, that's another thing people complain about when it comes to North Carolina seafood, is the cocktail sauce is sweet and just basically tastes like ketchup. Well, again, people are cutting corners, and they're using this commercial stuff instead of making their own the way they used to. So, for my cocktail sauce, I use ketchup. Ketchup is the base. And my fermented ketchup, it's a homemade fermented ketchup. The recipe's in the cookbook. It's 10 times better than anything you can buy in the store. But yeah, when it comes to cocktail sauce, I don't mind using some Hunt's or Heinz or whatever. It's just a base. Add to that a good spoonful of chopped horseradish, grated, to your taste. I like it very hot, very spicy. Or you can use prepared horseradish, like Engelhofer's. That's a brand that's in most stores. It's grated horseradish preserved in a little vinegar. Delicious stuff. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Just look and make sure there's not a lot of sugar in it, because who puts sugar in their horseradish? People put sugar in everything these days. I don't get that. I don't like a lot of sugar in my food. Anyway, so ketchup, horseradish, a couple of dashes of Worcester sauce to taste. A couple of dashes of hot sauce. I usually use like some Texas Pete or Tabasco. Just a couple of shots of that, and some lemon juice. Stir it all together. Taste it. You want to add a little Creole seasoning, you want to add a little black pepper, it's up to you. It's good to go at that point. It's bright, it's tangy, it really gives that nice offset to the richness of the fried food. You can dip your fries in it if you want as well. And always, after I fry the fish, I fry the fries because, I'm just going to keep using that oil a couple more times. And I like the way the fries kind of take up a little flavor of the seafood. It really tastes like, seafood restaurant fries. They have a very unique taste. Some people just like to use malted vinegar on their fries and seafood. Hey, go for it. Some, like I said, some just like citrus. A lot of times I do that. Some like tartar sauce. There are so many tartar sauce recipes. The original was a mixture of mayonnaise, I think a little relish, and cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is very bitter. If you like that, go for it. A little pinch of cream of tartar. I wouldn't go too far with it whatsoever. I will usually take a little mayo, mix in a little more of that chopped horseradish. It's a flavor I really like. Let me think. Mayonnaise, horseradish, chopped dill pickle. And I use, kosher dill pickles. I use homemade fermented dill pickles, real pickles. And mix in a good pinch of dill tops, the dill weed as they call it in the store, and parsley. And just mix it up. And a little squirt of lemon juice, salt and pepper. I'm good to go on that. So, that's simple. That's simple. What's the other thing that you think of in a North Carolina seafood restaurant? It's going to be the hush puppies. Hush puppies are nothing more than a mix of cornmeal, usually a little flour, and people put a pinch of sugar in there. I like to do some chopped onion, maybe some chopped jalapenos, maybe even a little bit of cheddar cheese. Make it up into a batter. Some recipes use eggs, some don't. Some just use water, some use beer. Anyway, it's just sort of a stiff batter. Ball it out, deep fry it, good to go. Good stuff. And maybe one day I'll tell you about my recipe for fried boudin balls, because boudin sausage is one of my other favorite things, and another thing that comes to mind when I think about deep frying. But the bottom line is, don't fear deep frying. It's not unhealthy unless you do it wrong. If you take care with it, you use a good quality fat, and you do it right, it's not unhealthy at all. It's actually probably better for you than pan frying, actually, because pan fried foods do absorb more fat. It's really healthier for you than a lot of cooking techniques. And, just be careful. Don't start a fire. Seriously. Like when people deep fry a turkey, I think that's like the main cause of house fires during the Thanksgiving season. If you're going to do that, get a legit turkey fryer, which is essentially a gas burner with a big old stock pot on top of it. Go outside, out in your driveway, and make sure the turkey is very dry before you put it in the oil. Otherwise, that oil is going to boil out and hit the burner, and you've got a rocket going in your front yard. And hopefully you didn't do it in the house. That's all I'm saying. I quite like deep fried turkey, but it's not my preferred way to make it. I don't deep fry Mars bars or anything weird like that either. I don't mind a fried pickle. That's an Alabama thing. They're pretty good. Dill pickle slices fried, but yeah, I can take it or leave it. But when it comes to my fried seafood, yeah, deep fried is the way to go. All right, now let's get into Potentilla. Now, Potentilla is what the herbalist Michael Moore would have called a YARFA. Yet another rose family astringent. And so he just threw under all the terms YARFA. Anything in the rose family, cinquefoil, rose, etc., blackberry, so many different herbs, even some trees. He just called it YARFA. All right, well, Potentilla is actually, I think, a little more unique than what we might call just a Yarfa, as actually are roses and many other things. Potentilla has documentation going at least back as far as Dioscorides. He said a decoction of the root reduced by 1/3 by simmering, held in the mouth, is able to relieve toothache. It brings down the inflammation, essentially, is what it's doing. It's astringent. Like I said, it's a rose family astringent. Used as a mouthwash, it stops rotten ulcers in the mouth. Gargled, it relieves roughness in the throat. And taken as a drink, it helps flowing bowels and dysentery. In other words, the astringent properties help with diarrhea. It relieves arthritis and sciatica. Pounded finely, boiled in vinegar and applied, it restrains herpes, the viral eruptions of herpes. They're kind of like cold sores. And, cold sores are caused by a variant of the herpes virus. So if you get them, this is a good one to think about. It dissolves swellings, goiters, hardened places, edema, aneurysms, suppurations. These are sores. Suppurations and erysipelas was a skin inflammation. Conjunctivitis, it's an eye inflammation. It heals skin lesions and psoriasis. Juice from the tender root is good for disorders of the liver and lungs and for deadly poisons. The leaves are taken as a drink with honey or diluted in wine and a little pepper for recurrent fevers. The leaves of 4 little branches for a paroxysm every 4th day. A paroxysm is a spasm. It's a palsy. It could even be considered a seizure. Let me see if I can give you his exact quote on that. He said, the leaves of 4 little branches for a paroxysm every 4th day, 3 for a paroxysm every 3rd day, and 1 for a paroxysm every day. So, depending on how severe the condition was, he recommended more or less, or actually the duration in between. That's an interesting word. I would not have known what paroxysm meant had it not been for William F. Buckley. There was someone who wrote of Buckley one time that his sesquipedalian verbosity reduced his opponents into paroxysms of obloquy. It was sort of a joke about how Buckley liked to use big words. But what that meant, sesquipedalia means 7-syllable words. Verbosity means knowing a lot of words, using a lot of words, or having a big vocabulary, essentially. Reduces opponents to paroxysms of obloquy. In other words, sputtering, spitting fits. Anyway, I got a kick out of that when I read it. He said they also specifically helped with epilepsy, taken as a drink for 30 days. With 3 glasses of the juice of the leaves taken as a drink would cure jaundice. So, again, epilepsy was not well known back then. Seizures could be caused by several things, at least for a variety of seizures that would have been considered epilepsy. Dioscorides believed Potentilla was quite good for it, and several other authors have as well. Applied with salt and honey, it heals wounds and fistulas. Taken as a drink or applied, it helps those who are broken, and it stops flows of blood. He was specifically talking about broken foreskin, like circumcision, basically. If anyone carries cinquefoil around his body, he remains without suffering. So they believed at the time it had some kind of, spiritual power, some ability to ward off evil. A lot of herbs are associated with such things. He said it helps the eyes, tumors, goiters, hardened tonsils, the uvula, sores under the tongue, the joints, disorders of the nerve, the teeth, scabies, which is itchy parasitical disease, caused by pernicious famine. Well, when people got hungry, they were more prone to get parasites for obvious reasons. Same way in nature. I've told you before how no deer dies of old age. The moment they lose a step, either a coyote is going to rip them apart or they're infested with parasites. So that used to be the same for humans, and unfortunately still is in some places. And it would help draw down the afterbirth. A decoction poured on the hands is excellent against fears and enchantments. So again, you've got one of these sort of superstitious associations. Therefore, gather the herb when the moon increases at the time of the sun's arising. Anyway, he again gets into what's called in various cultures, and given the number of the cultures, he's talking from the Egyptians to the Magi to the Romans, it was to the Gauls even, and then it was known as a very important herb in many cultures about 3,000 years ago. So I mean, there's so much history, on this herb. I couldn't begin to get onto it. But Saint Hildegard von Bingen, writing around 1100s, described it as a cold herb. She said the coldness is good for a healthy person and prevails against fevers which arise from noxious food. Take tormental, which is another word for potentilla, by the way, and there are a couple words, we'll get into that, also called silverweed. So anyway, take tormental and cook it in wine with a little honey added, strain it through a cloth, and drink it frequently at night on an empty stomach, and you will be well. Father Johann Kunzel said that Potentilla erecta was his best remedy for diarrhea. Potentilla is also an ingredient in the Swedish bitters. Probably came into that use through what Dioscorides has said about it being good as a remedy against poisons, because the Swedish bitters has its origins in the old Theriac and other universal anecdotes. Father Nape wrote of Potentilla as the silverweed. He said silverweed grows best, as its German name implies, where the geese like to be. Okay, apparently it's called, you Germans are going to hate the way I say this, Gansfingelkraut. Okay, that's the best I can do. People have named it after its mode of operating, also called cramp herb, in other words. It helps with stomach cramps. It helps with diarrhea. That's all he's saying. Tea made from silverweed is an excellent remedy for attack of cramp in the stomach, abdomen, or elsewhere, even in cases of tetanus. So it apparently has some antispasmodic properties. So far as this can be worked upon, this little herb renders very good service. At the commencement of the attack, or better still, when symptoms of the attack first appear, the patient should be given 3 times daily very warm milk, as warm as possible, in which such herbs, as much as can be taken with 3 fingers, have been boiled for a tea. A greater effect may be attained if at the same time as the tea is taken, a poultice is made of boiled herbs and laid upon the afflicted part. That would be, again, the astringent and anti-inflammatory properties. He said that no mother of a family should omit to gather a dry a sufficient supply of such herbs, potentilla, or tormental, or silverweed, whatever you want to call it. She knows herself how painful such frequently occurring spasmodic attacks are, and how it gives still greater pain if she sees her dear ones suffering without being able to help them. Father Nape was all about kitchen medicine. It was all about family medicine. It was all about teaching the kids to gather the herbs and the mothers how to administer them. It was rather revolutionary in late 1800s Germany, and very counter to the big government, the festering Nazi and socialists that were beginning to take over things. And as I've said, his book was the best-selling book in the year of that era, next to the Bible. Very, very influential herbalist. Brother Aloysius was his protege, and he said, cinquefoil or Potentilla reptans. The root decoction is good for fixing loose teeth and for toothaches. Leaves used for blood spitting, that's usually tuberculosis. Leukorrhea, stomach and intestinal cramps, bleeding, gravel, that's going to be like bladder stones, kidney stones, repressed menstruation, dysentery, jaundice, scurvy, dropsy, and alleviates infections of the kidney, bladder, and bleeding gums. Leaf tea is also good as an eye wash for ulcerated or suppurating sores. When steeped in boiled milk and taken hot, cinquefoil is especially highly praised for cramps of the heart and chest. He mentioned Potentilla tormentilla, which is a very closely related plant, used for heavy bleeding, chronic diarrhea, blood spitting, ulcers from scurvy, and to quench the thirst for diabetics, heavy menstruation, hematuria, internal sores, bedwetting, and urinary incontinence. And he actually had some really good advice as far as, and so did Maria Trebin, really in the Germanic tradition. They give children astringent herbs to help with bedwetting. It kind of tonifies the bladder. It just kind of tonifies things up and makes them better able to control their bladder while they're asleep. The Ashkenazi Jews who, they really transferred all that ancient, Jewish, Egyptian, and Babylonian herbal knowledge into the Central European tradition, which is one of the things that makes German, Polish, Hungarian, etc., Russian herbalism really so fantastic. Dietrich Cohen and Adam Siegel wrote, in folk medicine, the whole plant decoction was employed in the treatment of fever. And I cannot pronounce all the names of these Polish Jewish towns, Ukrainian Jewish towns. You do not want to hear me do that. So I'm just going to say, in a certain town, the decoction relieves stomach ailments, diarrhea, and bloody diarrhea. In Anapole, I can say that one. A midwife bathed infants suffering from indigestion in a decoction of the whole plant. A decoction prepared from a combination of silverweed, Potentilla, clover, meadow cranespiel. Meadow cranespiel is another astringent geranium, essentially. Was a folk healer's remedy for stomach ailments that had caused an elevated temperature. In Cherkasy, the plant was used for chest disease and tuberculosis. The same decoction was given as a sedative in something I can't pronounce. No, I'm not even going to try. The same remedy was used both externally and internally for epilepsy, which echoes the plant's use in ancient Greece. I'm just reminded of Spaceballs. You remember when yogurt starts to speak and they think he's speaking in Yiddish, he's just clearing his throat. Oh, I love Mel Brooks. Decoction made from silverweed with erect clematis. Now, clematis is a little dangerous, so we'll talk about that another day. Comfrey and the leaves of Guelder Rose was given by a folk practitioner in the form of a steam bath for contusions and rheumatic pains. The same formula was employed as a respiratory steam for headache and relief in Zvingrodka, I believe. A decoction of the plant was washed over affected areas to cure rash and pimples somewhere else. An exact replica of the folk remedy used in contemporary Bristol, England. That's interesting. For sores caused by venereal disease, a decoction was given. In the Pale, which is this like collection of Jewish settlements along the river, the plant was widely used in the treatment of gynecological disorders. This mirrors a similar treatment in Russian folk medicine. Midwives made a decoction of the whole plant that was drunk by women experiencing menstrual cramps, and the plant steamed was applied to the abdomen of women in labor. A decoction of the plant was given to drink in cases of complications after delivery, and for the same purpose, a steam treatment administered by pouring the decoction over a hot stone was known. Decoction made of silverweed and meadow fleabane was given to women suffering from gynecological diseases. Children who suffered from scrofula were bathed in the plant decoction, while children and adults suffering from metabolic disease were made to drink a similar decoction, somewhere I can't pronounce, somewhat similar in practices to contemporary Russian folk medicine. You will see a huge overlap between especially Ukrainian, obviously, and Russian folk medicine for obvious reasons. In folk veterinary medicine, the boiled plant was fed to cows to increase lactation. Gerard wrote of silverweed or potentilla, cinquefoil, whatever, as wild tansy. He also included several types of cinquefoil. It can get a little confusing, but I think all these were YARFAS, we'll just say. He said, boiled in wine and drunk stoppeth the laxing bloody flux. Again, he's talking diarrhea, even bloody diarrhea, and all other fluxes of blood in man or woman. So he could be internal bleeding or menstrual bleeding. The same boiled in water and salt and drunk dissolveth clotted and congealed blood in such as are hurt or bruised with falling from a high place. So if you ever fall from a high place, have some cinquefoil in hand. The decoction hereof made in water cureth the ulcers and cankers of the mouth, if some honey and alum be added thereto in the boiling. Sorry, 1500s England, it's Elizabethan, stick with me. It hath many good virtues, especially against the stone, inward wounds, and wounds of the privy or secret parts, and clotheth up all green and fresh wounds. So, good wound herb. The distilled water, when the herb is distilled in water, essentially is what he's saying, taketh away freckles, spots, pimples of the face, and sunburning. The English were so concerned with freckles. I guess they did not want to be confused with the Irish and Scots. So they wanted pure white skin, and this is one of the herbs they used to get pure white skin. But the herb laid to infuse or steep in white wine is far better. But the best of all is to steep it in strong white wine vinegar, the face often being bathed or washed therewith. Frankly, I love freckles. Anyway, I think they're very cute. Cinquefoil is called in Greek, well, I don't need to get into that. Specifically of the cinquefoil, he said, decoction of the root drunk, cureth the body of bloody flux, same thing he said earlier, but also stauncheth excessive bleeding. The juice of the roots, while they be young and tender, is given to be drunk against diseases of the liver and lungs, and for all poisons, same as Dioscorides has said. The same drunk in mead or honeyed water or wine, wherein some pepper hath been mingled, cureth the turchin and quarchin fevers. Now, what that means, the herb being drunk in mead or honeyed water would help with malarial fevers. These were fevers, as I've explained before, that were very predictable. They'd come every 2 days, every 3 days, every 4 days. As I've said before, Sir Walter Raleigh, when he was beheaded, knew exactly when his next fever, malarial fever, was going to come along, and he asked to be beheaded at a specific hour before that point. That's how predictable malarial fevers are. He said it would help with the falling sickness, that's epilepsy, again. The leaves used among herbs appropriated for the same purpose cureth ruptures and burstings of the rim and the guts falling into the cods. In other words, severe internal injuries using these astringent herbs. Juice of the leaves cures the jaundice, comforts the stomach and liver. Decoction of the root held in the mouth doth mitigate the pain of the teeth, and stayeth putrefaction and all ulcers of the mouth. Helpeth the inflammation of the almonds of the throat. Who knows what the almonds of the throat are? Raise your hand. It's those swollen glands you get right under your jaw, when you're getting a sore throat or something. So he was saying this was good for rotten teeth, sore toothaches, mouth ulcers. All this stuff was very, very common in 1500s England. The English were just known for bad teeth. There are many reasons for that, some genetic, much to do with the excessive consumption of sugar. And it's not that sugar actually rots your teeth, as you were told. The body's processing that sugar, the insulin response, actually has to pull calcium from somewhere. And if you don't have enough in your diet, it starts taking it from your teeth and your sternum, your breastbone. And so bad teeth, the sugar rotting your teeth, are really more caused by the excessive intake of sugar affecting the blood sugar. Now, sugar can also cause certain acids in the mouth, but anyway, that's not important right now. He said that the root boiled in vinegar was good against shingles and fretting sores and cankerous ulcers. Oh, and he also says again how he thought it was good for epilepsy. Apparently, a learned physician named Ortoflo Morolta, presumably Italian, I guess, had really experimented using the leaves boiled with water and lingam vitae added thereto against the falling sickness. That's tree of life. It goes by various names. No, that's lingam vitae. It's arbor vitae. Well, anyway, lingam vitae, Lignumvitae, very commonly used in herbal medicine, used for epilepsy if the patient be caused to sweat upon taking thereof. He likewise commendeth the extraction of the roots against the bloody flux. So anyway, he's saying that basically a tea made from those two herbs and sweating would help prevent epilepsy. Again, I don't know what those seizures are being caused by. Definitely worth experimenting with. Culpeper, about 100 years later, said, the plant is under Venus and deserves to be much more known in medicine than it is. Usually he means it was an herb that was good for women's issues, menstrual issues and such. It is of the nature of tansy. Well, that's important to point out that tansy is actually toxic. Okay, you can die from taking too much tansy. Potentilla cinquefoil, pretty safe herb, actually. The leaves are mildly astringent, dried and given a powder. They will frequently effect a cure in agues and intermittents. Agues are fevers, intermittents are again those malarial fevers. The roots are more astringent than the leaves and may be given in doses of a scruple or more in obstinate purgings attended with bloody stools. So he's saying the root's better for diarrhea, especially bloody diarrhea, and also good for immoderate menstrual discharge. Helps reduce it. Strong infusion of the leaves moderates the bleeding of piles, that's hemorrhoids, and sweetened with a little honey is an excellent gargle for sore throats. He goes on to describe what he called a strawberry cinquefoil that was very similar. We don't need to get into that. Maud Grieve, as usual, does a great deal to clear up all the confusion between all the various British and European herbal traditions in her A Modern Herbal of 1931. But interestingly, at this time, in 1931, it was still in the pharmacopoeia of the United States. It was actually official medicine because she said the plant is very astringent, and in some places it even been used for tanning leather. So that puts it in the same class as oak bark. She said it was one of the most powerful of our native aromatic astringents, and for this reason it has been termed English sarsaparilla. And more modern use, we'll just sum it up here, and I could go on and on with this, trust me. This is really one there's a lot of info on, but we'll just go ahead and sum it up here. Plants for a Future says the plant is considered to be one of the safest native astringents and is widely used in herbal medicine in the treatment of diarrhea, dysentery, sore throats, etc. The whole plant, and especially the root, is antibiotic, strongly astringent, hemostatic, and hypoglycemic. It is used especially in the treatment of diarrhea, dysentery, irritable bowel syndrome, colitis, ulcerative colitis, etc. Externally, the plant makes a good styptic for cuts, etc. And a strongly made decoction has been recommended as a wash for mouth ulcers, infected gums, piles and inflamed eyes. Extracts are used to treat chapping of the anus and cracked nipples. The plant's effectiveness as a toothache remedy is undeniable, and it has also been a benefit in treating bedwetting by children. So, yes, that sums up about 3,000 years of herbal history in one brief paragraph, but it is really good herb, really good. Along with other herbs of the rose family, wild roses themselves, wild geranium, like cranesbill geranium or herb Robert as the English call it. Really great herbs to have on hand. And as I always say, oak bark. If you have bad diarrhea, if you need to dry things in, sage also has its place. But yeah, potentilla, tormental, silverweed, whatever you want to call it. Excellent herb. So y'all, I am going to go peel and fry some shrimp and fix some cocktail sauce. And I think I may fry up a couple of flounder fillets as well and make some coleslaw. Did I even tell you about the coleslaw? Well, it's pretty simple. Just chop up some cabbage. I don't grate it. Chop it up. Mix it with mayonnaise. And I like to use hot pepper vinegar that peppers have been infused in. Salt and pepper to taste. No sugar, please, unless you just really like it. You can add a little dill pickle juice. You can add some grated carrot for sweetness. Absolutely delicious accompaniment to any fried dish, especially seafood. Anyway, y'all have a great, great week in this beautiful month of April, and I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.